We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. That's 26 years we've been doing this crazy thing around here. All of it brought to you by friends at the Maryland Lottery. Got Raven scratch-offs to give away. The Maryland Crab Cake Tour, the holiday edition, which usually means some crab imperial or some oyster Rockefeller or something mixed in there. We're putting it out on the road. We're going to be at Coco's. We're going to be at Casas. We're going to be with our friends at Fadley's downtown. The whole schedule is up at Baltimore Positives. Check that out. Also, our friends at Jiffy Lube Multi-Care driving us back and forth. Luke's getting us ready for football. I'm getting ready for the holidays. I made a little escape on the day after election, which was the day before the Ravens played 2 games in 3 days. Wednesday was like a Saturday. Thursday was like a Sunday. And I escaped to New York right after the election, and I spent like a day and a half doing what I do in New York, which is just walking, eating my face off, eating with my eyes, smelling with my nose, looking at things. It was 80 degrees. And I took a turn out of Bryant Park. I got off the subway, off the train. I came up, and there's a giant ice rink, and it was 82 degrees in New York City in November. And there was an ice rink that was melting with a Zamboni and all this delicious food around. And I'm in Bryant Park, and I thought I had a moment. I had what Yogi Berra would call deja vu all over again. I thought it was the summer of 2001 and Hard Knocks with the Baltimore Ravens, the world champion Baltimore Ravens, with all sorts of characters of media like Shannon Sharp and Brian Billick and Hall of Famers like Ray Lewis, the great Tony Saragusa, the late, great Tony Saragusa. And this guy put me up to it. Back in the day, he took a shine to me. I don't know why. He is the greatest documentarian and sports storyteller of my lifetime or any lifetime. And if you don't believe me, ask Bob Costas, ask a whole bunch of people. But somewhere along life's journey, I managed to pick him up and bring him along. And as Dick Schaap once said, collected him. He is Ross Greenburg. I could like go all Lipton on you and read all of your things and all of that stuff, but I don't even know what you're doing. I just know I love you, and you always loved me. And I turned in Bryant Park, and I looked up at what used to be the HBO building there, and I'm like, this sort of that weird sort of triangular angled thing, and I'm like, I need Greenberg in my life to cheer me up. How are you?
I've been great and I'm still doing it and I don't understand why, but all these years later. And by the way, 2001 Baltimore Ravens Hard Knocks, do you realize that was the first reality sports series ever? That was it. That was the start of this whole cascade. I guess the box to box people like everyone to think that Drive to Survive was where it started, but it actually started with me and Steve Sable. A guy named Marty Callner called and gave us the first idea, and we took off running with Hard Knocks and haven't looked back. Still on the air.
I haven't had you on in a couple of years, and I don't know if we've even done Zoom because I've been doing video for 5 or 6 years. Maybe sometime during the plague, I had you on.
Yeah, you
And
did.
you're a recurring figure in my life because of those kinds of events. Like I'm in New York, I'm walking through, and I think of you, or something HBO, or something boxing, or something Costas, or some any of the projects you were involved in. But the thing that moves me the most, being an expatriated media member now, I've been thrown out of the media here. I've been truly blackballed after 40 years of doing this. But what I notice the most that I don't know if you'll ever be given credit for, but whatever these team websites are now, they are a living, breathing 24/7 voice as a snarky, prickly voice in social media to make fun of the visiting teams. They have their own voice, but more than that, the video portion of what,
Right.
let's say, Larry Rosen was doing here, we're trying to do Emmy Award winning 25-minute mic'd up pieces that begat everything that Sable started with miking up coaches and John Facenda and all that came even before your
Right.
time.
That's right.
But every team website now is a reality show,
Yeah.
and they have editors, they have more people out in that building doing the work than you had in Westminster 24 years ago, because they're doing it every single day, and they've
Yeah.
been inspired by what you did, which is
I hope.
storytelling on a nonstop basis.
Yeah. And what you have to do is dig deep for the story. I mean, you can't, you can't just do the fluff and keep it on that level. You have to dig deep. I always tell all of the people out there that trained with me and are doing such great work. And I'm real proud of all the people that have come through HBO that now are out there doing all this product. I have guys that work for me that are doing the fight this weekend, and Gabe Spitzer runs Netflix Sports. It's just fun. Brian Lockhart runs content at Disney and ESPN. So it's fun to watch them kind of expand on what we did all those years at HBO up until I left in 2011. Then, I started selling to all of them. So I had to go on the other side of the table. And now I'm out there pitching everybody to do, whether it's docus or movies or different things, and it's a lot of fun.
I know my partner, Greg Landry, who did my documentary, which you can find out on YouTube. No One Listens, Everyone Hears, was the name of my documentary. And I did think through your eyes of like, all right, how's the story going to get told? Who's going to tell it? What do the voices look like? What are the pictures? How does it move? And look, I'm an old writer. I've written books. So storyboarding and saying what is a chapter, what makes up a chapter, and what makes up a story, and how to write it. I've been doing that since I was a kid, but doing it the way you do it, and I think the way modern reality TV. I've been invited to be in a couple of reality shows. They weren't reality. They were coming to me and telling me what I was going to say, how I was going to say it, where I was going to stand, how it was going to be pitched. And I looked at him. I'm like, that's going to look like shit on TV. And I don't really want I don't need a documentary about me or some sports piece I have or my apparation. I don't want to do that. But it seems to me that if I go back 25 years and you've done a million documentaries, when I think of your Hard Knocks, being the first one and how you were doing it, some of it was a little storyboard. And I don't know if you scripted Goose locking Shannon Sharp in the locker room. You certainly
Oh,
didn't script those cats dancing like Ray Lewis. And the reason I bring all this up is every Ravens fan is familiar with large parts of that. Todd Heap and his beautiful wife, who have been friends of mine for a quarter century. But those story pieces you put together, some of it was pre-storyboard, like we've got a Super Bowl team here and Billick's going to be a wise ass and we know what we're working with. But then things just happen, like Goose getting drunk in Westminster one night and you happen to be there.
right.
That's part of the difference between a real storyboard and what becomes a final edit, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've had situations even in this new world of going to sell, these kinds of series where, someone from the network has come to me and said, "Can we get those two guys talking about so and so?" And I was like, "Well, not really, because we're flies on the wall and we're kind of following them, and we're going to tell our stories by getting them coming to us. We're not going to tell
So
them
you're
what."
not blocking them like actors on a stage.
No, not
See,
at all.
that's where like the fact that
Manufactured them.
the sports franchises, when they do it now, they actually do outtakes when somebody walks into a shot because they were trying to create the dramatic coach walking down the hallway and some
Right.
jackwagon from sales pops out and we got to shoot it again. And I'm like, and you can obviously see that it's beyond what you did, because I didn't think you ever got in the way, or there was never any perception that you were telling the coach how to cut a player. It just happened that
Oh,
way and you were
yeah.
there, right?
And the beauty of it is you can tell, the viewer can tell. They're not stupid. They can tell when a coach is walking down a hallway, having been told, "Okay, let's go, coach, start walking." I mean, the viewer can tell that's a setup shot. It's like a movie that way. And so yeah, the camera didn't have to be perfectly focused and blocked out. It was all natural. And I continue to do those kinds of shows in that kind of a way because it really brings it to life. You feel more of the drama that way. And you get, if you want to do some things, you can add music appropriately, you can add some sound, you can add little things that make a difference. But you let the dramatic story speak for itself. Like you said, the shenanigans that Shannon Sharp and Sarah Goose and all of them were doing to the rookies and all of that stuff. You let those play out naturally, and you shoot it. And that, 10 years later, we were doing Rex Ryan flying off in the coach's room with his coaches trying to get Darrelle Revis back. And
I
oh,
still never mention getting a snack with my wife
yeah,
without mentioning a
yeah,
Rex Ryan
yeah.
profane snack.
Yeah, and the funny part about that was, if you remember, the guys in NFL Films, the cameraman shot the lineup of the events prior to, what he was going to speak to. He took a shot of that, and that began the segment. And so they firmly read that there was a snack at the end of the meeting. And so when he said it, let's get a goddamn snack or whatever, it played off of that. And that's what made it so funny. If he had just got said, let's get a goddamn snack, would have been
It
okay.
was
And
in the script,
yeah, yeah,
his
this
script.
impromptu, right, right.
Ross Greenburg is here, the greatest storyteller I know. He is still telling stories. So bring me up to speed. What are you doing? Because I mean, I think of Tyson, I think of you, I think of HBO, I think of you. I think there's a lot of things that make me think of you. But including the Zagroba Fund, which is another thing, and a friendship, a whole different side of 9/11 in New York, and my wife and her health. But for you, when anything you do and I see it, I'm drawn to it to maybe put an eye on it. And sometimes the subject matters hockey, sometimes the subject matters
Yeah,
boxing or
yeah,
people, or
it's
certainly
different.
baseball. But what's making you tick? What are you pitching to whom now, and what gets
I'll
you
pitch,
excited?
I'll pitch some things. I don't know if enough people saw Bill Russell on Netflix. I did that a year ago, and it's been on for a while. Very much worth watching because he was a dear friend, and his story is revolutionary in this country and very impactful. I have a movie at Netflix which was announced on the 99ers, the team of Mia Hamm, Julie Foudy, Brandy Chastain, Michelle Akers, and those women that were really the first pioneers of women team sports in this country, in that they packed 93,000 into the Rose Bowl and they were seen by millions worldwide. Yes, there were some good, solid collegiate basketball teams prior to them, but these women took it to another level. Certainly, they took women's soccer to another level, which has never looked back. So we're doing a scripted movie for Netflix. We're finishing up the script now, and hopefully that'll start production in 2025, and we'll get it on. I'm
We say
also
scripted movie. Is that a documentary? No, or is that an
no,
acted
no,
thing?
no, that's acted. I did Miracle, so this would be
That
that.
version. Okay, okay, understood. That was Kurt Russell, correct?
Yeah, that was Kurt Russell. So
Okay.
this, I don't know who the stars of this movie will be, but we'll get some nice big stars, I hope. Netflix is 100% behind it and pretty excited about it. I
Do
think
you
it'll be,
prefer that kind of movie making to what I
well,
know you to have done way more of, which is documentary
it,
storytelling, and fly on the wall documentary, which is different than, I don't want to call you a reality show guy. I don't want to insult you,
no,
Ross.
no, no, I get it, but yeah, it's just different. There's a cachet to making a movie, and having a lot of people attend a theater and watch you film. I remember when we did Miracle, I went with my son. He was about 12 years old, and we went to like 7 or 8 theaters the night it premiered. That was really cool, to see that you had made something and that all these people were assembling for this excitable weekend to open a movie. So it's a different kind of thrill. And if you make a great sports movie, and I shouldn't be the one to say it, but I think that was a pretty damn good movie. Um, it lasts forever. Sports movies have a certain staying power that other movies may not have. And if it's told right and done right, and it has that kind of a story to tell. And I think this women's soccer movie has the same kind of dramatic story to tell that will get people crying their eyes out at the end and move them emotionally. I know, it always did that for me.
Well, when you were running HBO, you were very instrumental in having stories told, having things made, not to mention real sports and just a whole bunch of journalism things that I was really drawn to over the course of time. But the notion that that sports, the reason you turned in the wide world of sports or any ball game is you didn't know the ending, right?
Right.
And I think part of your Hard Knocks legacy was we're going to start this thing in August and Ray Lewis might break his leg, or you who knows what's going to happen. That
Right.
that is part of all of that. And then there's the I guess the part of making 30 for 30s, right? Which
Right.
that's not what the movie on the 80 Lake Placid team or on the 99ers would be. But that part of what the 30 for 30s have become, which is taking a place in time and telling that story in a documentary kind of way, that's even a different art form, right? And I think that those are the things that tell these stories of triumph in the aftermath, where you go back, and I know you were involved in a Tyson story a couple years ago as a storyteller, that the people that live it go back and that story gets told very richly after Ali Frazier years later by the
Exactly.
people that you would have tell those stories. And I don't think anybody ever did that better than you. And the 30 for 30 is one big homage to the kind of work that you've done.
Yeah, well, I appreciate everything they've done. I'm actually doing a 30 for 30 now. I can't announce it because they haven't announced it, but I love, the Disney machine, and I think they've done a great job. And I think that, yeah, what we started in the late 80s, which really kicked off with When It Was a Game in 1980, I mean 1990. Yeah, and we must have produced 60 or 70 documentaries up until 2011 when I left.
When it
Those,
was a game begat Ken Burns, and like all of that storytelling really started around sports around then, right? Really.
I guess so. I mean, I never thought of it that way. I was just thinking of it internally within HBO, but you're right. I think we changed the way people looked at sports docus. I mean, Steve Sabol, as you said, followed, Dick Butkus for a year and Vince Lombardi for a year and did beautiful hour-long documentaries of each. So I would say he and Bud Greenspan, who was also a friend and a hero, who took the Olympics and told dramatic stories. But for the most part, sports was figured to be just a playground and a place people played. And if you did a documentary, it was just kind of get some people to talk about a sports moment and go from the sports moment to an interview.
And run
But
the highlights, right? Literally, right?
when it was a game, it took us about 6, 8 months, and we turned the sports documentary into a living, breathing piece of documentary artwork that had never been done before. Whether it's sound effects, music, you know, um, obviously it was revolutionary in that we had all this color home movie footage of baseball and told the story of what it was like from the 30s through the 50s. But it changed the way I looked at storytelling. And I remember right after that, we did Rebels with a Cause on the story of the American Football League. I did with John Madden, and we told that entire 10-year story of how the league was formed and brought in Liev. I had looked for a narrator kind of like Facenda, and I couldn't find one. And then I found myself in my living room and all of a sudden fell off the couch because I heard Liev's voice on a different history of rock and roll docu that had done. And I called the next day and signed him up.
How important is the voice?
Oh, it's massively important. If you have an actor of his ability with that voice, it can become legendary. I mean, he became the most well-known, narrator since John Facenda in our world. And I think that speaks to him and also, the ability of our producer directors at HBO to formulate these beautiful stories. And the writers that wrote the words for him. And I think, yeah, it's very, very, very important. Although in today's world, a lot of networks don't really want narrators. They feel like it takes away from the ingenuity of the product to have a narrator. In certain instances, I understand it. Like this next 30 for 30 I'll do will be in the first person by the subject. But for the most part, I still like sneaking in a Jeffrey Wright or a Liev or someone like, the way we told the Bill Russell story, it needed a narrator because there was too much information that had to be put in there that you're not just going to get from an interview.
I actually got my narrator from a rock and roll band and from an old VH1 show before they were rock stars, a buddy of mine. And he was the first person. My friend said, "We're going to do a documentary about your career." I'm like, I don't have time for that. Like I know this is a year and a half ago. And then I sort of thought like at 40th anniversary, I better do it, especially if I got somebody that can be as good at doing it. And we had the script and he said, "Who's going to read it?" And I'm like, well, it wasn't written for me. I said, it was written for a voice. And I called Keith Brewer. And the first night I said to my wife, I said, if Keith Brewer, who did before they were rock stars of VH1, says he'll do it, it's a good idea. And that night the thing happened because the voice is, to me, would be everything because
Absolutely.
without that, no one will stay with it, right? I mean, James Earl Jones was unavailable last year for me too. You wouldn't produce the damn thing, so I had to go rogue and do it here locally, Ross.
I get it. I get it.
But
But
I did gain incredible appreciation, and I think I gain appreciation for you because you said rock and roll, and I wanted to make a little plug for my own gig, and certainly for my buddy the Ravens and Keith Brewer. But the rock and roll documentary world, it's my favorite. No offense to sports, no offense to your Mike Tyson or this or that, but every one of those ones, whether it's Rush, Eagles, Tom Petty, pick any of Pearl Jam, those things are like a chef's kiss to the work that you do. And I feel like every one of them is done by you, even though I didn't know you didn't do most of them or any of them, but it feels like it's right up your alley. Do you love watching those things? Or
I
are you too
love
critical?
I love watching them. No, no. I mean, every once in a while I'll get too jealous to watch, but not music ones like the Eagles, and I've watched so many now. The storytelling there is so rich because there's always guys dropping out or coming in, or there's drug issues. So those have
There's natural tension in rock and
yeah,
roll.
yeah, it just is. There's always a breakup for a certain amount of time, and it's really dramatic stuff. So yeah, I really appreciate that.
Well, that's my favorite documentary art form. I mean, you really, so for you with documentaries in your era, and I guess we're almost the same age, that was so PBS, right? Like when we were kids in the 70s, the only place you could learn, Nova or something. I'm trying to think of the TV shows my uncle watched, on PBS. That's what documentaries were relegated to, right? Like this is a relatively new phenomenon in the modern era to storytelling this way, even though the Greeks and the Romans were doing it a billion years ago, right?
Yeah, the funny thing is, I think a lot of my instincts got picked up through Roone Arledge's ABC Sports in the 70s, though, because when he started doing the up close and personals for the Olympics and the way they covered the Olympics by really zoning in on the athletes and their stories, that's where I really got an appreciation for making people laugh, cry, and think and get a chill up their spine over those moments because you felt it through his eyes and the way he instructed Cosell and McKay and all those announcers to really go hard into the players' life or the athletes' lives. And because even when I was doing baseball with ABC in the 70s and Howard was up in the booth, I'll never forget the way he gave you this beautiful historic oration of Reggie Jackson's 3 home runs in the sixth game of the World Series in 1977. It
And none
wasn't,
of it scripted with Howard, right? Like
oh, no,
Howard was just going, right?
oh, just going right from here. And so I had an incredible appreciation for that world. And so when I got to HBO, my whole philosophy, whether we're doing a big boxing event with Tyson, as you said, or whoever, was okay, let's send the same chills up their spine while they're watching these events. Because I was a weird kid. I used to cry when a team won a championship. And still, if it's my team, I still shed a tear or two.
But I
Um,
think of Freddie Patek in the dugout as a kid. I'm 10
yeah,
years old. I mean, just those moments of the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat, right?
boom, boom. Those two sentences. I mean, that's what Roone Arledge lived by. Written on a napkin, by the way, by Jim McKay on a plane.
My
Because
dear friend in Baltimorean, the great Jim McKay. How about Sean McMahon is stepping? I mean, all you guys are making
yeah,
way for these kids in the network and the TV business.
that's the world we live in.
Next up, Ross
You too.
Greenburg. Nobody did it better. A longtime documentary, storyteller, Ross Greenburg Productions, HBO. You kids out there, Google the Hard Knocks thing with the Ravens back in 2001, and
Watch it.
and all the fun we had around it. So bring me up to speed a little bit. I mean, I really did think of you because of Bryant Park, and I don't get together with you too often. What moves you at this point? And I think about sports. Like, I think you're a Yankee fan. I'm pretty sure you are,
Yeah,
based on 61 and
yeah,
all of that.
yeah.
The Yankees making the World Series. Baltimore's sort of back in this. The Lamar Jackson thing that's going on. There's just so. That's the thing about sports. It never stops, and the stories keep coming, and the money keeps coming, and the avarice and greed, and just all like society, all of it. But it is, from a media perspective and a storytelling perspective, the work you used to do is now so steroidal that I just, even if you love the Ravens, I don't think you can sit there and can consume every piece of video content that they make available.
No, I mean, I'm a diehard. In 1963, my father got tickets to Shea Stadium for the Jets. We got season tickets,
You
$6.
suffering, you suffering SOB. You
Now,
poor SOB.
I did as a 13-year-old go to Super Bowl three. So I had my moment, okay? But let me tell you
Did you
something,
see
that,
him wag his finger from where you were sitting as a
yeah,
kid?
it was right in the tunnel right next to me. Yeah, yeah,
There's a great example of
yeah,
whoever was holding the camera that got that shot. That's the
yeah.
only way.
That's
I
how
never
it
see it
comes.
from any other angle. I just see it from the 12 from behind, right? And the
That's
llama
so-
rug. I mean,
Yeah.
Namath is his own. Come on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was my superhero, but and I got to know him very well, which was a thrill of a life. You've had that, I'm sure, in your situation. But yeah, I look for really cool stories to get me inspired and then try to act on them. Whether it's Caitlin Clark, which I'm fascinated by what she's doing to the world of women's sports. There's it comes from all angles for me. Yeah, I was inspired by, the Yankee story, but I got inspired by the Mets story this year. Whenever there's a crazy comeback or a special moment for any athlete, it drives me. And I think Lamar Jackson's going to be interesting through the rest of the year if he gets that Super Bowl, trophy that he's coveted and will establish him as one of the greats, because having won all those MVPs until he wins that Super Bowl, he's not going to feel fulfilled. It's just what athletes do. So each of their stories, the human drama is what gets me going, and you see it every day in this world. So especially in sports.
I think, last thing for you, Ross, women and where you are with telling women's stories. And I guess I go back to Billie Jean King, right? And then I would go through the 70s where Chris Everett was beautiful and I was interested in that. And tennis was a game that came to me and
Right.
one that I played. Women's golf, not so much, but it did come with, Nancy Melton, at that period of time. But
Boatman.
then the soccer thing that you're telling the story from, quarter of a century ago, and now women's basketball making that next step here. And before
Right.
that, to your point, Peggy Fleming, ice skating, gymnastics, Mary Lou Retton, who was my all-time favorite guest, and you talk about Olympic storytelling. That's really where the women's movement began in the Olympic side. But the business of telling stories and selling tickets and selling marketing, despite how the election went last week, women's sports is a growth. I don't know that men's sports can grow much more. I question that with NIL and college and all that. But it feels like it's a blue sky for women's sports
Yeah.
specifically. As a
Wow.
56-year-old old dude here, that if I had a granddaughter, the world would be
Yeah.
much more open for her.
Yeah, which is why I made a deal with Hello Sunshine. We joined forces. Reese Witherspoon's company and I have joined forces to try to really get to the well and dig up all these women's stories in sports, and start producing multi-episode documentaries or single documentaries, whatever. But we're gonna dive in now. You'll see some announcements coming up where we're gonna get some good documentary series made.
Did I blow the embargo? Okay, well, we won't get that right. Ross Greenburg is here. You're so old, you know what an Olympic embargo is, right?
Yeah, I do. I
It
absolutely
wasn't even economic.
know.
We're in a different world. We really are, right?
Yeah. You got it.
Ross Greenberg from Ross Greenberg
Thanks.
Productions. Nobody does it or did it better than him as the sunlight hits my eye and I look sort of demonic here. Let's stay in touch. I never go to New York without stumbling into something that makes me think of you. So I'm glad that when I think of you, you return the call and come on and tell great stories. Keep telling them. Anything else to promote, you let me know when that 30 for 30 thing happens, all right?
You got it. Thanks, Nestor.
Ross Greenberg checking in, and the Yankees still didn't win a championship here
No,
this year. I'll have Janet Marie from the Dodgers coming in here with her canopy and showing off all of her rings the way some of my other friends have who work for the Red Sox and some other places. We'll get there one day. We're the Orioles. We're trying harder. I am
I
Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore positive.